today I'm going to be analysing the poem Portrait of a Loaf of Bread. Now this poem is used to highlight the fact that in South Africa we have a great inequality between class and race. So the first couple lines are used to create an image in our head of an ideal rural farm. This image is made by using the words gold-topped wheat stalks and sheaves. Now in these first two stanzas it's very important to pay attention to the verbs that are used. So ground, carted, moved and bundled are used. And these verbs emphasize the harsh and hard labor needed to make the bread. So this poem also describes the journey between the farmland and the table on which the bread is served. So the emphasis is on the very harsh, treacherous process that it requires to make the bread, and it's a great contrast to what actually happens when you're eating the bread and the verbs that are used to describe how you eat bread. So these verbs will be mentioned in the next couple stanzas, but for example, the verbs that are used to make the bread are ground, carted, moved and bundled, but to eat the bread you slice the bread, you butter the bread. It's very calm movements. And there's another great contrast with the verbs that are used to make the bread on the farmlands and the actual setting of the farmland, because there is a peaceful scene of the farm created in our heads where it says rolling fields, gold-topped wheat stalks, and this is in great contrast with the treacherous, hard and long process that is required to make the bread, shown by the verbs ground, carted and moved. So the treacherous process needed to make bread can be seen as looking back at the past, at the lives of the black people and the lives that they had to live, and how they are still disadvantaged in many ways. So it can basically be compared to apartheid and how black people or people of colour were disadvantaged in apartheid, and they had these really, really long, treacherous jobs that involved a lot of labour, and it basically is emphasizing the fact that hasn't actually changed much to this day. So instead of complete equality, many black people are still living hard lives by doing hard manual work because of how they missed out on education and university in the past. So because they missed out on education and university, they are not qualified to have jobs that require more skills than hard labour. Therefore, even though apartheid has ended, people still reap the consequences of it. So where it says mountains of dough, this is a hyperbole, and we should also know that dough can be referring to money, because the speaker is talking about the people that are sitting in the cafes with more money and more privilege than those working in the factories. Where it says pans as hot as Satan's cauldron, this is a simile and it's a biblical reference. So this line conveys the violent process needed to make the bread, which emphasizes the hard job that it is and the tough times the people of apartheid had to face, and still face today. So in this stanza, the image of privileged people at a cafe in a cozy, warm and easy environment is created by the words cafe, warmly wrapped in cellophane, waiting for the cook to slice and toast. So this shows the contrast of the lives of the workers who make the bread and those who sit in the restaurant. There is a theme of inequality again, because the labourers are living in this harsh environment and they're not getting any of the special treatment that the people in the cafe are getting, like the cook slicing their toast, the butter, the marmalade, and the warm environment. The verbs mentioned in this paragraph, such as the slicing of the toast and to butter and to marmalade, are very different to the verbs that we mentioned in the first paragraph, such as ground or carted, which again emphasize the privileges that the people sitting in the cafe have and that the labourers don't. So another harsh image of inequality is created in our heads, where the speaker talks about the labourer. So his fingers are caked with cement because he is doing hard labour throughout the day to make this bread for the people sitting in the cafe. Meanwhile, the people sitting in the cafe they're not working, first of all, and they're eating bread that they have not actually worked for or made themselves. So there is a lack of punctuation in this poem, which places emphasis on the education that black people or people of colour received during apartheid, where they were taught in Afrikaans at a poor level. Therefore, they don't know how to actually use punctuation at a high level because they first of all didn't understand Afrikaans and it wasn't taught as well as white people were taught. When it says that the labourer mauls a hunk, we can assume that there is no knife or fork, butter or marmalade. So it represents a very unsophisticated style of eating and emphasizes the inequality of the different privileges of those sitting in the restaurant and the labourer. Where it says man can live on bread alone, we can detect some sarcasm there. Because you may be able to survive on bread, but you cannot actually live life to the fullest with such minimal resources. Because the man eating the bread is having a very different experience to the people actually sitting in that cafe and getting served the bread. They have a much better quality of life. So the same principle applies to the Ubuntu education that the people of colour received during apartheid. It is better than nothing, but it is still not enough to reach your full potential because they did not actually get a proper education. Some of them didn't get degrees, and now the rest of their life is reaps the consequences of that because they cannot get a job that requires lots of skill and pays well.